Okay, we are ready to start. So yesterday we learned about the machlokes, Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. Oh, I see that Mr. Zellinger's there. Did that mean Chaim Fear came on time to turn on the television, or are you using
No,
your
no,
using your phone?
I'm using my device.
Oh, okay. Thank you. It's nice to see you. Thank you.
It's good to see you.
So the Gemara brought a machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish as to whether or not, if you have an aver that is less than a kazayis of meat on it, we know for sure there's no tumas soil, but would there be tumas magu masa? Rabbi Yochanan said there's no such makar for that, and Rish Lakish learned it out of the pasuk where it says oy b'meis ze'ever nechel min hameis. Rabbi Yochanan said oy b'meis ze'ever nechel min hameis is used to teach us that not only is a bone the size of a sa'ira tamei b'maga, it's also tamei b'masa. I didn't understand yesterday, and I reached out to the Olam if they could have a pshat. Is in the pasuk there's 4 extra words. So from bachalal we learn ze'ever nechel min hachai, and from oy b'meis we learn ze'ever nechel min hameis. Bishlam, according to Rish Lakish, it's a chiddush in each one that there could be a tumas mago masa. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, that the only extra chiddush we're learning from this pasuk is that not only is that some kesera tamei b'maga, but also tamei b'masa. Why do we need 2 psukim to teach us that? Why do we need both oy b'chalal and b'meis? So I still don't have an answer to that. Then the Gemara had a question. We had a 4-way machlokes on Daf Yud Ches. After a Nazir who became tamei is metar himself, so on day 7 he gets the second zrika of the paraduma. He'll go to the mikvah, and on day 8 he'll bring karbanos. So when can he start counting his naziris? Because he has to reset the clock. When does he start? Does he start on day 7, or does he start on day 8? And there was a 3-way machlokes whether he could start first thing in the day 8, or after he brings his chatos, or he has to wait even till after he brings his asham. The Gemara wanted to know, what does our Mishnah hold? Our Mishnah says on the 7th day, ad sheyitaher. From ad sheyitaher, the Gemara is medayik that it must be the 8th day when he brings his karbanos, because the next Mishnah that we learned just says umaza b'shlishi v'shvi, and right away you can start. It doesn't say ad sheyitaher. So you see that the Mishnah, the earlier Mishnah, Mem Tes Amid Beis, when he said ad sheyitaher, it meant business. It meant that you have to wait till the 8th day in the morning. Then we learned the Mishnah yesterday, which discussed a whole bunch of tumas. Some of them are tumas derabanan, some of them are deraisa, but there are things that do not destroy the previous counting of naziris. So you have to go through the process of being metaher, and then you continue on to count where you left off. And just to run through the list, it was chachais, which are the canopy of a tree. Price are awnings, like stones sticking out the side of the wall that created awnings where there could be tum underneath. Besa pras is the rabbanon as well, where if you have a field that was plowed and there's a mason side it, so there'll be little bone fragments all over the place. Eretz Amim is what we're going to focus on today, which is the chacham were going to tum on Eretz Amim, and we had a shaila. What is the structure of that tumah? We'll get to there in a minute. Goel v'doifik, we said was the matzeva, as well as the foundation, the concrete foundation, the stone foundation to hold the matzeva. Revius dam, we learned, is the raisetz matama, and you have to have hazah shlishi shvi, but we have a halach l'moshe Sinai that it will not destroy the counting of the naziris. Oil means if there was tumas oil, it's not a separate thing. For roiva tzamos, we learned as well that a chatzikav tzamos makes you have to restart your naziris. Roiva tzamos, although it makes you tamei, even the raisa, you don't have to recount your naziris for it. Pelam anoigim b'meis, we discussed yesterday at length. A keli touches a meis, it becomes an avatuma. If you touch the keli, although you become tamei, it doesn't stir the naziris. We had a discussion in Tosfos if it's referring to metal kalim, because metal kalim would become an aviyah voice. And then we had a question is, if in fact it was a metal keli and it became an aviyah voice, when you touch it and your tummy, does it destroy your naziris? We had a sheet in Tosfos who said that we know that whatever destroys naziris is also prohibited for a kohen to become tummy with. And therefore, Tosfos wanted to say in one shita, he brought down that even though you'll be tummy and you need azor shlishi v'shvi, it's a full tumah. Nevertheless, that's not one of the isurim for a kohen to become tummy with, and it also would not require that a nazir restart his count, which took us then to Amud Beis. Let me get to Amud Beis. Okay, and then on Amud Beis, we also learned that the days of the Zav and the Zava, and you may scare Shom Mitzayah, those you can actually even count as part of the Cheshbon, but the day that the Mitzayah is actually Tameh, and during his Tahara process, during that period, you cannot count those days towards his Nazirs, but those days are not Mavatal, the days that he had already counted. Okay, what we're into today is the last thing that we ended off with yesterday, where the Gemara had a shaila. What exactly is the structure of a Tumas Eretz Amim? Is it a Gzeira that we're afraid there's a mace buried there? And therefore, there wouldn't be a problem if you were in Eretz Amim in such a way where you would be insulated from contracting Tumas mace. For instance, if you were there in a box in your own built-in oil, or you're in a box that's not Makabal Tumah, then you'd be able to go into Eretz Amim, because if the whole concern is that you'll become Tameh, well, if you protect yourself from becoming Tameh, there's no issue. Or maybe they just don't want you going into Chutz La'aretz, and therefore they made the Gzeira even on its airspace, even without a din Tumas Mace, even without a concern of Tumas Mace, you just become Tameh if you go in. The Gemara said from our Mishnah that lists off that you have to get Azah, B'shlishi, B'shvi, for going into Eretz Amim, proves that it must be a Tumas Mace type of Gzeira, not just a general Gzeira. The Gemara said it's not a riot, because maybe when our Mishnah says you have to get Zrika of the Paraduma on day 3 and day 7, maybe that doesn't apply to all of the Tumas listed in the Mishnah, maybe only to some of them. And to prove its point, the Gemara highlighted the case of Kalim that touched the mace. There, you wouldn't need Hazar Shlishu Shvi. Nevertheless, it's listed in our Mishnah. So you see that although the Mishnah finishes off with saying that they need Hazar Shlishu Shvi, it doesn't necessarily mean that it applies to all of the Tumas listed in the Mishnah. So we remained with Hashaila. What is the structure of Tumas Eretz Amim? Is it a Gzeira of someone becoming Tumas Mace? And therefore, if he has insulation from Tumah, there wouldn't be such a Tumah? Or is he Tumah no matter what, even Alavira Gazru, because they don't want you going into Chutz La'aretz? And that is the subject of today's Gemara on Daf Nun Hey Amud Aleph. So let me get to Nun Hey Amud Aleph, and then we'll get started. Let's suggest that this question of what is the structure of the Gzeir of Tumas Amim, let's suggest that this is actually in Machlokes Tanoim. Shkoyach of Chaim. Is that Chaim who turned on the big television?
Yes, it was plugged out and gone and disconnected. The things didn't work. We're going to shut it down.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Leimikatanoi. Let's say it's a Machlokes Tanoim. Haneichnas le'eretz Amim. If someone goes in to Eretz Amim, b'sheida teva umigdal, and he was sealed in a box that wouldn't be Makabal Tumah, either because it's an oil or because it's very large, and very large boxes are not Makabal Tumah. Rebbe holds that a person is still going to be infected with the Tumah of Eretz Amim. Rabbi Yosy Bar Yehuda Matar, yet Rabbi Yosy Bar Yehuda says there's no problem of Tumas Amim. Zokmer Maila, the simplest and easiest and most obvious way to understand this machlokes between Rebbe and Rabbi Yosy is Rebbe Savar Mishum Avira. Rebbe holds even though you're insulated from Tumah, you're still Tameh, because the Isser is not, the Tumah is not a Tumas Mace. The Tumah is just because you've entered into Eretz Ha'amim. And therefore, Rebbe is Matama, even though you're in a Sheda, Teva, Umigdal. But Rabbi Yosy Bar Yehuda Savar Mishum Gusha. The Hisser is only an Hisser because we're afraid of Tumas Mace. If you're insulated, then you're Torah. So this is a Machlokes Tanoim as to whether or not the Tumah for Eretz Ha'amim is a Gzeira of Tumas Mace, or if it's just a new Tumah just to discourage people from going to Chutz La'aretz. you don't necessarily have a raya that that's the machlokes Rebbe and Rabbi Yosy. They might be arguing about a different halach. The chulama mishum gusha. Let's say everybody holds that the machlokes is of gusha, which means a suffix tumas meis. There's actually two pshatim in Tosfos how to learn this next line. I'm going to learn it the first pshat in Tosfos. So the chulama mishum gusha. Everybody holds it to suffix tumas meis. So if that's the case, why Rabbi Yosy is matayr is obvious, because when you're in a teva shedo migdal, there's no problem with tumas meis. So Mar Sovar, oil zorach shmei oil. Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda holds that even though this is a mobile oil, you're in a box. It's not a permanent fixed structure. It's mobile. One mandabar holds oil zorach shmei oil, which would be Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda. Mar Sovar and the Chachamim, Rabbi who holds its tamei, holds lo shmei oil. So therefore, this shade of teva migdal will not protect you from the tumas meis. Frag the Gemara. V'atanya Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda Omer teva shimelei kelim. Whatever you had a box full of kelim, v'zark al pnei meis, and you threw it, and it went over a mace. The oil in an oil, tamei, it's going to be tamei. But if it was a stationary oil, tahara would protect the kelim. So from the fact that you see that a oil that's mobile, it's flying through the air, flying over tumah, and you see Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda holds it does not protect what's inside it from tumah, obviously you must hold that oil zark is lav shmei oil. So how could you say that the machlokes between Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda and Rebbe is that Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda holds that this oil zark is shmei oil, this mobile oil is a good oil? We have a halacha that Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda said that oil zark is not shmei oil. That is how Tosfos learns this Gemara in the first pshat, and this last Vatanya that we learned is a kasha that's slugging up this approach. However, Tosfos in the second pshat says Vatanya is b'dichusa, and it's actually proving the point, because it's making a distinction between an oil zarok, where Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda said if it's flying through the air, completely untethered to anything, that's an oil zarok, which will not prevent tumah, which will not protect what's inside it from becoming tummy. But the moving oil that we're discussing is b'shei teva migdal. Either he's sitting on a wagon, its wheels are firmly planted on the ground, or he's sitting on an animal, or people are holding this box. That's much more tethered to the ground, even though it's mobile. There, Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda would agree it's shmei oil. So therefore, the Vatanya is b'nichusa, and it's saying Vatanya b'nichusa. In fact, Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda holds that an oil that's tethered to the ground, even though it's mobile, that would be shmei oil. What is not shmei oil? If it's actually something that's thrown through the air, completely untethered, only over there is it not a good oil. But nachas doesn't mean that it's necessarily stationary. It could be mobile, but it could be on an animal. It could be carried by people. That's also considered a stationary oil. Legabe this din of tumah.
So this Braise here is speaking about the same box. If it would be laying on the ground or whatever, then it wouldn't be.
No, but the munachas means doesn't necessarily mean that it's not moving. The munachas mean it's on an animal or people are carrying it. B'shei teva migdal, like the case of the rice at the top of the helmet.
And it's going over, still going over the mast.
Yes, of course. Yeah, of course.
Well, what's the source of the tumah? Like we're traveling over a.
There's a mace there. There's a mace there. So the case was there was a mace in the house. Imagine a mace in the house. So the whole house is tummy. And you take a self-contained oil, you take a balloon that's a sealed device, self-contained.
Yeah.
There's stuff inside that balloon, and you throw it across the room. So it goes through an oil of mace. So anything you throw through an oil of mace is now in the oil of mace as it's flying through the air.
Unless
it's protected.
Like a mace in a house. What's the difference between that and a mace and a kever? Where the kever is, let's say it's many tefachim around.
No difference at all. If the kever has pesach tefach, it's just like it's in the house.
It shoots up and doesn't matter anyone.
No, if it's in the oil, the tumah spreads throughout the entire oil. It doesn't
It
just
doesn't
shoot,
shoot up past, doesn't it go shoot up through the oil?
not if it's only if it's an oil sosum. If it's a regular oil, meaning it's a little bit opened, then the tumah is contained within the oil. But anything that goes through that oil will contract that tumah.
Okay, but if it's a self-contained kever, like a tube.
And now you put, let's say you have a self-contained cover, and you throw something through that cover.
Not through it, over it. I'm talking about over it.
No, over it would not become tummy. It only becomes tummy if you're throwing something through an oil of mace. Over an oil of mace, it would not become tummy.
No, he's saying if anything goes over any keva sosum, it should.
We're not talking about a kever sosum. We're talking about the type of kever that contains the tumah.
Right. So, what he's asking, if you're going in oil mess, right, or you're going over keva.
Because we're talking about a kever that's not sosum. So a kever that's not sosum contains the tumah, and if you went over it,
so the inside of the
protected from the tumah.
The inside of the house has the same tumah as on top of a case with sosum, no?
No, inside the house has the same status as inside a kever that's not sosum.
Why?
Because that's what a house is.
The whole avir is tumah, no?
I'm sorry?
The whole avir
On the inside of the oil, not on top of the oil.
Yeah. So then this is what he's asking.
The what? What's the kasha?
If the balloon goes through the inside of the oil hamas, then because the whole avir is tumah, so you say that everything inside the box is going to become, if it's
not an oil, everything in the box will become tummy.
Right, and if it's called menachas, then it's not becoming tumah. What's the difference if this same box is going over a cave of sosum? Then
it would be the same thing. It would be the same thing, but we're not talking about that. Yeah, if it went over a kever sosum, it would be exactly the same thing. If it was protected within its own oil, it would not become tamei, and if it was not protected, it would become tamei. So you're right. The halacha would be the same. But we're discussing in the Gemara a case where something went through the oil of mace. But of course, if it went over a mace and it was in the oil, it would have the same protection if it was in a good oil. That's correct. Now, this shaila of oil zoruk is very halacha l'maisa. And the first place that it comes up with is a shaila from the Noida Yehuda. Is one allowed to open up an umbrella on Shabbos? If it's a movable, if it's mobile, you see that everyone seems to hold that if it's completely mobile, oil zoruk lav shemei oil. So maybe you should be allowed to open up an umbrella. The whole issue of opening up an umbrella is you're creating an oil, you're building an oil. But if oil zoruk, if a movable oil, a mobile oil is not shemei oil, so then you should be able to open up an umbrella on Shabbos. So the Noida Yehuda, of course, does not allow us to open umbrellas. One of the Savaris, he says why it wouldn't be allowed is because who said that the only use of an umbrella is when you're walking? What if you're standing in the rain and you're opening up your umbrella? That's not an oil zoruk at all. So, of course, we don't carry umbrellas. The other place where oil zoruk is very relevant is flying in an airplane that we discussed yesterday. A coin that's flying in an airplane is an airplane in oil zoruk. If an airplane is an oil zoruk and the coin flies over a basic forest, then there'll be an isser. So that's a whole big sugya of a coin flying. So then there's the shaila is, what if there's a mace on the plane? Is a coin allowed to fly in a plane where there's a mace? Even if there's an oil, but it's an oil, even if the mace is contained in an oil, is it an oil zoruk? So most boys can pass them today that, of course, you're not allowed to fly in a plane where there's a mace in. And there was back in the days of Reb Moshe, there was even a shaila if you were allowed to fly, if a coin was allowed to fly out of JFK, because the vast majority of flights that would depart JFK for Tel Aviv had mesim, and they were told they should fly out of Newark because most of the mesim are sent through JFK, not through Newark. But then there's the shaila of what if you fly over a basic forest, and the Charedim saying you can't even say you go bus roy places. There's no bodies buried because there's a halacha that kol kavua kamech tal mechza. The mess isn't moving around. The mess is kavua. So therefore, it's a suffix if a coin's allowed to fly over a basic forest. So the halacha is that most people paskin that it would be a shayla of a drabanon because maybe it would be an oil. Or, I think unless we know for sure that it's flying over a basic forest, I don't think there's an issue. But kohanim will have to consult with their halachic authorities. But this is a very interesting shayla of oil zorok, and it has impacts not only on Tumah, like the Kohen, but it has impacts on umbrellas as well. Okay, Gavaltic. So let's see the Gemara weiter. So depending on which shot and toises you learn, the Gemara either accepts this machloikis, that the machloikis Rebbe and Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda is about oil zorok, or it rejects it. Because in the first part of toises, the Gemara is saying that Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda holds that oil zorok is not shemei oil. So Akiva's writing in that they put special coffins that are oils, right? But it's still movable, and it's still an oil zork. So even putting the meisim in a special box has to come on to kulas, because at the end of the day, there's shittas who hold that an oil zork, since it's mobile, it's not considered an oil and it won't protect from tumah.
Let's say even if it has a pesach tefach, if it's sealed from all sides, it's oil. So
then you have the problem of kever sosum. That's right. That's a good point. Okay, zok the Heilige Gemara. Listen, Kayhanim get truma and they get not even a meiser because of the knas, and they get to matas kuna, so they have their struggles too. They have to worry about how they're flying to Eretz Yisrael. Okay, zok the Heilige Gemara. We have another pshat. The other pshat is as follows. Let's see where we're up to. El dechul alma mishum avira. Now the Gemara wants to suggest another approach. So the first pshat was the machloikis is if it's mishum avira, mishum gush. The second pshat was everybody else mishum gush, and the shaila is if oil zark is shmei oil. And the third pshat is really everybody else mishum avira. Umar savar kivin the lo shchicha gazru berabana. Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda who holds that if you're in a shade of teva migdal, it's not going to be also to go in. You don't become tamei. You know why you don't become tamei? Because it's an unusual situation. When the Rabbanim make gzeres, they make gzeres for common halachas, not for unusual things. No one's carrying you around in a box. They don't make gzeres in such a case. So therefore, they only regard it tumas eretz ha'amim only if it's something normal, walking in normally, going in the box. They were in geyser. Umar Savar and Rebbe would hold avagav l'shchicha gazu berabanim. The Pashup shot that everyone learns here is they wouldn't be geyser in an unusual place. But there are acharayim who are masber more. Your abundant could be don't even have a koyach to be geyser in the case of lo shchicha, because be'etim the rabbanon making zeres is very, very dangerous, because we know that you're not allowed to add to the Torah. You're not allowed to add to the Torah, and it's a huge problem to make zeres. The rabbanon have to make zeres in certain places, but when they make zeres, they have to make it very clear that this is not min Torah, it's only a gzera. For instance, when they said not only is basar b'chalav basar, but basar oif b'chalav is asar, they had to make it clear b'daraisa avad it's mutter. We're just making a harchaka, because if it's passed off as a daraisa, that's a huge problem, and that's in fact what Chava's mistake was. Chava was the first person who made this mistake. She wanted to make a harchaka. I shouldn't even touch Desadas. That was a good thing. But the problem is, she blurred the line. She should have told the Nachash, it's only us for me to eat. I want to make a harchaka, I'm not even going to touch. That would have been fine. But the moment you start mixing your gzeres with your Rebbeinu Shalom's Torah, that's when you have problems. Like the Chassam Sofer says, you can say all my Torah in your name, but don't say your Torah in my name. Zok Gemara weiter. Vatanya, we also have a raya to this approach, that there's this distinction between if it's a davar shchiach, which the Rabbanim would be geyser, versus a davar that's not shchiach. Hanichnas l'eretz ha'amim b'sheidu tevu migdal tahar, but the karnu v'svina, which is also an oil, u'b'iskaria, which is a type of ship, tamei. So you see clearly why is there that distinction? It's because it's normal to travel in a ship. It's normal to travel in a wagon. Therefore, they were geyser there. But in an unusual way to travel, they weren't geyser. Tosfos actually shares with us a cute story of what a skari means. Iskaria, Tosfos says, is a sailing ship, a ship with a mast. So Tosfos tells us that we learned a story about a ship with a mast, and it was the famous story between Ilfa and Rabbi Yochanan. Ilfa and Rabbi Yochanan were both massive Talmidei Chachamim, but they realized that they couldn't survive financially. They had to get a job. So they were sitting and talking, and Rabbi Yochanan overheard a malach that said, let's push this wall over these two Talmidei Chacham, let's kill them. So the other malach said, no, we can't, because one of them is going to be a Gadol Hador. So Rabbi Yochanan turns to Ilfa and says, did you hear that? And Ilfa said, no, I didn't hear a thing. What are you talking about? So Rabbi Yochanan understood that that was a message for him, that he would be a Gadol Hador. So because of that, Rabbi Yochanan remained in yeshiva, and Ilfa went to do business. And Ilfa, it always bothered him, he didn't come to Rosh Yeshiva. So he would always say, well, you think just because I'm a Bala boss, I'm chopped liver? It's cannot learn. And what he would do is he would climb up to the top of the mast of a ship, and he would say, if anybody can ask me about any Mishnah or Brisa that Reb Chia reviewed, and I don't know it, I'll jump off the mast of the ship. Because he's trying to show that just because I didn't stay in yeshiva, I didn't become the Rosh Yeshiva, it doesn't mean I'm chopped liver. Okay, gewaltig. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's the Chachmas Adam wrote in the Hakdama to a Sefer that I was a balabas my whole life. So you might think, I'm not going to learn the Sefer. He said, I want you to know every spare moment that I had, I was learning and I was chazering. And then he said, I was starting at Tilfa. I'm a lot of, I can't say sure, I'm not a Rashiva, but I'm writing my Sefer. Please read it. Please learn it. Okay, let's see the Gemara Vayter. We have a fourth approach of how to understand the machlokes between Rabbi and Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda. The whole problem is maybe he'll stick his head out of the box. Tanya, and we learned again Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda Omer hanichnas le'eretz amen b'sheidet tevil midol tahar at sheyotzei l'sham roishay rubai. So basically, the shaila is as follows. If he's in a karain, if he's in a normal mode of travel, it's normal to stick your head out the window and look. It's normal to reach out. So that's for sure it's usher. The question is, what about in the Sheidet Tevel Migdal, where we're not concerned that he's gonna stick it out? So basically, what they're saying is, if you just put your hand out into the Eretz Amim, we're not concerned about that. We're concerned if Rosh Verubay go with, and therefore only in the case where Rosh Verubay goes in, is there a problem? In a Sheidet Tevel Migdal, the question is if there would be such a concern. So at the end of the day, we do not have a raya from this brisa that there's a machlokes if it's mishum gusha or if it's mishum avir. Let's see the Gemara Vayter. You start counting over the cycle of the Naziris. Amar Rab Chisda said, Lo shanu ela b'Naziros muetas. This that you start counting over is only if you had a minimum 30-day Naziris. If you had a longer Naziris, mislik nami tolkin lay. Not only do we say that the Yemei Tzaras are not Seiser, you could count them along. You can count them along. Break the Gemara, how could you say that? Our Mishnah seems to say not like that. Matzav Rab Shafi. It says in our Mishnah, right? Let's go back to our Mishnah. The Mishnah says that as soon as you finish your Naziris, as soon as you finish your Taras, as soon as you finish your Tumah, whatever it was, you continue and resume the count where you left off. That's what it says. And the fact that you had Taras or these other type of Tumas, they don't disqualify your original count. So let's say you had a 30-day Naziris and you counted 10 days. Then you become a Mitzayir, so you wait till the whole process is over, and after the process is over, you start counting from day 11 and on. What is the case of our Mishnah, where it says that it's not Mavatal the Kaidmin, but you have to start counting from you can continue counting from where you left off. If it's Naziris Muetas, so what was the case that I just said? He counted 10 days, he became a Mitzayir, he waits for the whole period to be over, he gets his haircuts, and now he only has to count another 20 days. Can't be, because counting another 20 days after he just took a haircut wouldn't work, because Kaboy Gidol Seer, he wouldn't be able to cut his hair 20 days after he finished the being a Mitzayra, because he has to wait 30 days since his last haircut to be able to cut. So our mission doesn't make sense. Ella, we're forced to say that when our Mishnah says you just resume, when our Mishnah says you just resume and you don't have to start counting a new 30 days, it must be that our Mishnah is speaking about a case, Elalav b'Naziris Meruba. It must be that when do we say that you could just continue counting? That's if there's still plenty of time left. So for instance, let's say he was makabel upon himself a 60-day Naziris, and for 10 days everything went well, and after 10 days he became a Mitzayra. So then he goes to the Mitzayra, he puts on hold the count of his Naziris, he's still on day 10. After the Mitzayra is over, he has now another 50 days because his total Kabbalah was 60 days. So in 50 days, there's no problem. He can continue counting because by the end of the 50 days, he'll have plenty of hair to be able to cut. But what does it say? It just says you continue counting, which means you did not count the days that he was a Mitzayra. So you see clearly, not like Reb Chisda. How could you, Reb Chisda, say that by Naziris Meruba, you actually count the days that he was a Mitzayra? From our Mishnah, it's clear that we're speaking by Naziris Meruba, and our Mishnah says that you can resume counting where you left off. But avada, the days that you are a Mitzayra, you don't count those days. Zok Gemara, who Moisav Lavu Mafarik Law. Reb Shravi asked this kash on Reb Chisda, and Reb Shravi explains how it's not fair. B'Naziris bas chamishim yoim. It's speaking where our Mishnah is speaking where someone was makabel Naziris for 50 days. The Yosef Esrin, for 20 days he counted and everything went great. And after 20 days, meaning where there was another 30 days left to his Naziris, Bishyalida Bey Tzaras. And then he got Tzaras. So he has to deal with his Tzaras, and Megalech Tzaraito, he deals with his Tzaras, he gets his Giluach, and now he has to count additional 30 days. V'adu Yosef Talton Yoimin the Nazir. Isla Gidul Sar. That's what our Mishnah is talking about. Our Mishnah is talking about when do you count 30 days? No, when do you say that you can just resume to where you were at? That's speaking in a case where you were a Nazir, where the Kabbalah of Naziris was for 50 days. So let's have a look in Tosfos how Tosfos explains how this helps Reb Chisda. So I'm going to go back to Amud Aleph, because on Amud Aleph is where Tosfos addresses
What
this.
what would be different if it was for 40 days and he started this 10 days and after the 10 days? First he says about 10 days.
I'm very happy you asked that, Kasha, because you mamish quoted the words of the Tosfos. So let's actually look at Tosfos. Zokt Gemara, who Moshev Lavu Mafarklo, I'm 5 lines from the bottom on Tosfos on Nun Hey Amud Aleph. Who Moshev Lavu Mafarklo, B'Naziris Bas Chamishim Yoim Ayri Maslisin, B'Hainu Naziris Moetes. That is the Naziris Moetes, where you say that you don't count those days. B'Hainu Naziris Moetes Reb Chisda V'Achikam. Loi Shanu. This is what Reb Chisda said. Loi Shanu El Naziris Moetes. Where do you say that you don't count the days of the Mitzayah? That's by Naziris Moetes. Kloimar she'ein loy lasos rak yemei Naziris Moetes. You only have to complete the Naziris Moetes, and it's very, very important to read the Ran Miranshberg over here, because he changes the girsa to a very different word. Let me see if I could find it. Kisha Heschila is what the Ran Miranshberg says. So going back to here, she'ein loy lasos rak yemei Naziris Moetes kisha heschila yemei tzaraitoi. Like when you only have to continue on the 30 days as it was when he started the days of his tzaras. Kigoyin, the Yosef Esrim ben Naziris, he for 20 days paravid his Naziris properly, the Sialad be tzaras, and then he got tzaras. So the loch is the megaleach b'tzaraitoi. He has to finish his tzaras process and get his haircuts. For Hadu Yosef shloshim yom Nazir. Why do Isla Gidol Sar? Kloimu v'chagavna dinhu shelayalu yemei tzaraitoi kolikar. There you won't count the days of tzaras. Why? Because he needs another 30 days. And if you give him credit for some of the time that he was a Mitzayra, Well, now he's not going to have 30 days of growth of hair. So at the end of his tzaras period, he cuts his hair off. If there's only 30 days left to his naziris, after he finishes with his tzaras, he has to keep all those 30 days because he needs the 30 days to be able to do the giluach at the end of the naziris. But if there's 35 days left, there's many more days left, well, then we don't have a concern anymore that he's not going to have the 30 days. So zokt the Toshes weiter. If he needs a full 30 days left after he takes his haircut for Taras, so then you can't count the days of the Taras towards his counting of Naziris, because he needs those 30 days after the Taras is completely finished with. And therefore, the svara is that the days of 20 days that he counted before he got the Taras, that will count. And after he finishes with the Taras, he has to count another 30 days. Why? That's what the Mishnah is talking about. Here the Gemara asks Chaim's question. It's lavdaka 50 days. Exactly like Chaim asked. It would have been exactly the same thing if it was Nazir's of 40 days and he became a Mitzayra after 10 days. So let's go down to Tosfos and Amud Beis. So exactly what you said, Chaim, is what Tosfos is saying. So basically, all the Mishnah means to say is, if you have 30 days or less after the Taras is finished, you have to count 30 days. But if you have 30 days, if you have a longer Naziris, so let's say you had a Naziris of 100 days, and after 10 days, someone became a Mitzayra, then you would even count the days of his Taras towards his Naziris, because even when he's finished his Taras, he'll still have 30 days to grow his hair to be able to have a proper Giluach for Naziris. So just to be crystal clear, the way Rav Shravi understands Rav Chisda is the main rule that you need to follow is when you're finished with your haircut of Taras, before you can terminate your Naziris, you need 30 days of growth of hair. So therefore, if you don't have 30 days of growth of hair, you have to count another 30 days, which means you're not going to be able to count any of the days that you were Mitzayra towards that goal, because you need to have 30 days of post-Taras. But if anyway you have more than 30 days of post-Saras, because there's more days of Naziris in your original Kabbalah, then we would credit you for the days that you were actually a Mitzayra. Because even if we credit you those days, after the Mitzayra period, you'll still have enough time of Naziris to grow your hair at least 30 days so that your Giluach will be a good Giluach. Okay, and with that, we will stop here. Bez Hashem Yisbarach, and we'll be Mamshech tomorrow. Although today was a little complicated, today was like Aleph Beis compared to tomorrow. So tomorrow and the day after, we're coming on to some very difficult letter. Just to give you a little taste, if you open up the art scroll on tomorrow's daf and you look at the comments, he starts off by saying, this Gemara is extremely, extremely complicated. And due to the complication, we're going to stick only to the very basics so it won't be overwhelming. So that's just a warning. So the Olam should get a good rest today on Sunday because tomorrow is a real work day.
So tomorrow you're going to be here? Or?
No, tomorrow I'm also going to be online. And Bez Hashem, I'll be back on Tuesday.
Sure.
Thank you very much. I'm happy. It's 7:45. I'll have just enough time to get to the Buffalo Shul for Shachris.
Oh, good. Wait, you passed the border already?
Yeah, I'm on Grand Island. I just pulled off to the side so that we could learn. Okay, now today's broadcast is sponsored by, I have to make sure to remember that. Today's broadcast is sponsored by, let me just see. It's sponsored by, Rav Benzi Bench. Rav Benzi Yeshikoich. It's sponsored by Rav Benzi Bench. Little Nishmis, his grandmother, Shendel, Bas Moshe Yoina Halevi, Aleh Shalom Klein, whose Yortzeit is Chaf Vav Adar. She should be a Melech Yosher for her whole family and for all of Klal Yisrael. Shkoyach Benzi.
I see the sun shining.
Yeah, yes. Baruch Hashem. Okay, Zayim Tzlich, have a wonderful day.
Okay.